My name is Thomas Crane, and I was 65 years old the afternoon my sister tried to read me out of my parents' lives, in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building on Peachtree Street in Atlanta. The HVAC system ran a low hum through the room. On the table between the water glasses sat a small black USB drive, the kind you buy in a 3-pack at any office supply store. My sister did not know what was on it. My parents did not know what was on it. My attorney did. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge, the place where quiet men do loud things. If you've ever been overlooked by people who should have seen you first, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Thomas Crane. I am 65 years old, and I founded Crane Electrical Supply in Marietta, Georgia, in 1989 at the age of 28. I started with a leased warehouse on Commerce Drive, a used forklift, and a client list I had built over 3 years working for a larger distributor. I ran the company for 30 years. I was at the warehouse at 5 in the morning more days than I was not. I sold the business in November 2019 for a number I will not specify here, because the number is not the point. The point is what I did with my Saturdays. My parents, Earl and Norma Crane, lived at 1847 Whitlock Avenue in Marietta, in the house they had owned since 1971. My father was a retired electrician, 27 years with the county, the kind of man who kept his tools organized by size and never left a job incomplete. My mother was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday, sent cards with handwritten notes, and called every Sunday at 11 a.m. without fail until calls began to change in quality around 2021, becoming shorter, more confused at the edges, the way conversations do when memory starts pulling at the threads. I was the older child. My sister Vivian was born in 1963, 3 years after me, and she had lived in Marietta her whole life, within 4 miles of our parents from the time she graduated high school until the day this story reaches its resolution. She worked as a school administrator for 20 years before taking early retirement in 2017. After that, she had time, and she used it. Sandra, and I married in 2001. She was a landscape architect, patient and meticulous, the kind of person who looked at a piece of ground and saw what it wanted to become. We lived at a house on Whitlock Avenue ourselves, not my parent house, a different address, 3 blocks north, until 2008 when we moved to a larger house in the West Cobb neighborhood. Sandra died on February 14th, 2023, from ovarian cancer 14 months after diagnosis. She was 61 years old. I was with her. I will not say more than that about those 14 months except this. I attended every family meeting during them. I drove to every appointment. I kept my name on every document that needed my name. I did not tell my parents or my sister that Sandra was dying until 2 weeks before she died, because I did not want the information to change how I showed up, and I did not want their attention on her when her attention needed to be on getting through each day. The family meetings have been happening since 2013. My mother's health began requiring coordination, medication management, a part-time home aide, the gradual administrative complexity that arrives when parents age and the family must decide together what it looks like to take care of them. I flew or drove to Marietta for every meeting. In 9 years, from 2013 to 2022, I missed 2. One when my warehouse roof collapsed in a hailstorm in March 2017, and I was managing an insurance claim, and one when Sandra's first round of chemotherapy left her unable to be alone overnight. I called into both remotely. I was present. I paid my parents' property taxes on the Whitlock Avenue house for 12 consecutive years, $6,240 per year. Transferred to the Cobb County Tax Commissioner's office on the 1st of March each year, without my parents knowing I had done it, because my father had mentioned once in 2011 that the bill had come in higher than expected, and I did not want that sentence to come up again. When my father needed a hip replacement in 2017, after his insurance denied the claim for preferred surgeon, I covered the cost directly, $28,400, paid to the Marietta Orthopedic Surgery Center on April 9th. He recovered fully. He thanked me once and never mentioned again, which was the way he was and which I respected. In 2021, When my mother's memory evaluation revealed early-stage cognitive decline, I arranged and funded the initial treatment plan and specialist consultations. $14,700, managed through Dr. Paul Avery at the Emory Brain Health Center. I drove my parents to 31 cardiologist appointments between 2018 and 2020, every Tuesday and Thursday on a rotation. 2 hours each round trip from the West Cobb House. I arranged a ramp installation at 1847 Whitlock Avenue in 2019 when my father's hip made the front step difficult. $7,800 installed by a Marietta contractor on a Saturday in October while I stood in the driveway and watched it go in correctly. The recording had been sitting in my desk drawer at the Crane Electrical Supply Warehouse since January 8th, 2015 at 9:14 in the morning. That was the date of the first recording. That was also the date of the first meeting at which I understood that something was changing in a room that had nothing to do with my parents' health. The meeting was at the Whitlock Avenue house. In the kitchen, Vivian had prepared an agenda. She had never prepared an agenda before. The agenda covered 4 items: medication schedule review, financial account consolidation, homemade hours, and item 4, a discussion of long-term asset planning. I read item 4, and my throat tightened once, and I said nothing. I watched Vivian move through the first 3 items with the efficiency of a woman who had rehearsed them. When she reached item 4, she said the accounts might be cleaner if they were organized under a single trustee. She did not look at me when she said it. I said nothing then either, but I had placed a small digital recorder, the kind used for business meeting notes, nothing specialized, in my shirt pocket at 8:47 a.m. before I walked through my parents' front door. It was recording. I had decided, driving over that morning, that I wanted to be able to remember what was said in these meetings accurately. I had 30 years of business experience, and I had learned the first 5 years that memory is selective and documents are not. I recorded every family meeting from January 2015 onward, 47 meetings in 9 years. I labeled each file by date. I store them on a dedicated USB drive in the second drawer of my desk behind a manila folder labeled Insurance 2014, which I had kept there for that specific purpose of misdirection against no one in particular. My hands went still each time I set the recorder down after a meeting, the way they did after a long day at the warehouse when the numbers had finally balanced. The attacks accumulated slowly. That is the nature of this kind of thing. It does not arrive in a single sentence, but in a pattern of sentences across years, each one reasonable sounding on its own, each one part of a reframing that required the full sequence to see clearly. November 2016, Vivian, discussing the homemade hours. I'm the one coordinating day to day, Tom. It's a different kind of presence than flying in for meetings. I let that settle. My jaw held. My breath stayed even. March 2018, Vivian, at the kitchen table, our parents present. Mom and Dad need consistency. Someone who's woven into their daily life, not someone managing from a distance. I kept my face neutral. November 3rd, 2019, the meeting I had come to think of as recording 12. My father had mentioned, the week before, that he was thinking about updating his will. Vivian had called me 2 days later to say she had some thoughts she wanted to share at the next meeting. I drove to Whitlock Avenue at 9:47 a.m. Recording 12 began at 10:04 a.m. At 10:31 a.m., Vivian said, Tom, we've all talked about this. The business was always going to go to you. But the family assets, the house, the accounts, those belong to people who were actually here. My stomach dropped. The specific movement of something foundational giving way by a fraction of an inch, not collapsing, just shifting, the way a beam does when a load has been redistributed without authorization. I said nothing. My father was looking at the table. My mother was looking at Vivian. Neither of them spoke. I'm not saying you don't care, Vivian said. I'm saying there's a difference between caring and being here. Mom and Dad know the difference. We all do. I kept my face neutral. I thought about 31 cardiologist appointments. I thought about $28,400 on a hip replacement. I thought about the ramp installation and the tax payments and the 14 months I drove to Marietta with Sandra dying at home and nobody in this room knowing it. I thought about the recorder in my shirt pocket. It was running. Something cold moved through my chest, and I let it complete its movement without naming it. I said, "I understand your point, Vivian." I did not say, "I have been recording this conversation and 46 others." In the 4 years after recording 12, the reframing accelerated. My parents' will was updated in 2021, and I was not consulted. I learned of the update from my father, who mentioned it in passing during a phone call in March 2022. The way people mention things they've been told are settled. The update, as I later obtained and reviewed it, reduced my share of the family estate from equal thirds to a specific bequest of personal effects only. No property, no accounts. Vivian and her husband were named as co-trustees. My throat went dry holding that document. My hands held flat on the desk. I set it down and picked up the phone. I called Victor Tanner at 11:47 a.m. on March 14th, 2022. Victor Tanner was my estate attorney, Tanner & Associates, on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, a measured, thorough man who had handled my personal estate planning since 2004. I had used him for the company's sale documentation in 2019. He knew what documents meant, and he knew what they could survive. I told him about the recording archive. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "How many recordings?" 47, I said. Another pause. "Bring them in," he said. I copied the full archive to a second USB drive on April 18th at 4:18 p.m. at my desk on Whitlock Avenue. The new desk, in the study of the West Cobb house, the room that still had Sanders' drafting table in the corner because I had not moved it and was not ready to. I labeled the copy Tanner, April 2022. I drove it to his office on Peachtree Street the following morning. He reviewed them over 6 weeks, pulling transcripts from the 11 most significant meetings. He flagged 4 as directly relevant to an undue influence claim against the 2021 will revision. Recording 12, November 3rd, 2019, he flagged separately. He called it the clearest single-session documentation of targeted exclusionary language he had encountered in 22 years of estate practice. The estate meeting was called for September 22nd at 10 a.m. Vivian had requested it through a Marietta estate attorney named Robert Haas, who had drafted the 2021 will revision. The stated purpose was estate consolidation discussion. My parents were present. Vivian and her husband attended. Victor Tanner appeared on my behalf. I arrived at Victor's office building on Peachtree Street at 8:22 a.m. The conference room was on the 14th floor. I took the elevator alone. The city was visible through the windows on the east side, the particular flat September light of Atlanta before the heat has fully lifted from the streets. I sat at the table and looked at the USB drive, which Victor had placed between the water glasses, and I understood why he had put it there rather than in his briefcase. Vivian arrived at 9:48 a.m. with her husband and Robert Haas. She looked at the USB drive and looked away. She looked at me briefly, and her expression was the organized kind, prepared, the face of a woman who had rehearsed this meeting. My parents arrived at 9:52 a.m. My father moved slowly. My mother sat down carefully, the way she did now, taking an extra beat to make sure the chair was where she expected it. I helped her with her coat. She said, "Thank you," without looking at my face directly. At 10:03 a.m. Vivian began. She presented a 2-page summary of the proposed estate consolidation, the house, the accounts, the trust structure. She described it as the arrangement that reflected where the care had actually come from. She said this in particular reasonable tone that makes a cruel sentence sound like a logistical observation. I didn't answer. Vivian's attorney made a secondary presentation. He referenced Thomas's contributions to the estate and characterized them as primarily financial, a phrase that, in the context of an estate dispute, is designed to sound like acknowledgement while functioning as diminishment. He said the financial contributions weren't documented in a way that reflected consistent family involvement. I kept my voice level. Victor Tanner said, "I'd like to play something." He opened his laptop. He connected the USB drive at 10:41 a.m. The first sound was the ambient noise of my parents' kitchen, the refrigerator hum, a chair scraping. Then Vivian's voice from November 3rd, 2019, clear, measured, unhurried. The family assets, the house, the accounts, those belong to people who were actually here. Then silence on the recording. Then my father's voice at 10:34 a.m. on that 2019 morning, saying, "Viv, Tom has done more for this house than..." And Vivian's voice cutting across, "Dad, we've been through this." My father's voice going quiet. I said nothing. The room held very still. Victor let 12 seconds of ambient kitchen sound play before he paused the recording. Then he placed a printed transcript on the table, 3 pages, recording 12 time-stamped, with the key passages highlighted in yellow. He placed a second document beside it, a 12-year record of Thomas Crane's property tax payments, contractor invoices, medical receipts, and monthly transfers, $847,000 in total documented financial contribution to the estate and the parents' well-being over the period covered by the recordings. Something in me closed down and held. Vivian's color left her face from the jaw upward. Her husband's hand, which had been resting on the table, went flat. Robert Haas looked at the transcript and then at Victor and did not speak. My parents were looking at the laptop. My mother's hands were in her lap. My father was looking at the table, the same table posture he had held on November 3rd, 2019. The posture I now understood was not indifference, but the posture of a man who had been told a story so many times he had begun to believe it was the only one. The 2021 revision, Victor said, was executed under conditions we're prepared to document as undue influence. The recordings establish a 9-year pattern. We're not asking for the room's agreement on that today. We're filing with Cobb County on October 7th. We wanted your clients to have the opportunity to hear what the court will hear. He closed the laptop. I picked up my jacket. I did not look at Vivian. I looked at my father. He was still looking at the table. Then he looked up at me, slowly, the way men look up when they've been carrying a version of a story that no longer holds its shape. His eyes did not ask a question. They acknowledged one. I nodded once. I walked out. Victor Tanner filed the estate objection with Leonard Burroughs, probate court clerk at Cobb County Superior Court, at 11:22 a.m. on October 7th. The filing cited undue influence on a vulnerable adult, my mother's documented early-stage cognitive decline dating from a 2021 memory evaluation, and submitted all 47 recordings as supporting evidence. Robert Haas withdrew as counsel for Vivian on October 19th. A family mediator, Carol Reese of Reese Mediation Services, was appointed by the court and convened the first structured family session on November 4th at 2 p.m. My father called me on October 12th at 6:22 p.m. The call lasted 22 minutes. He did not explain himself, and I did not ask him to. He talked about the fence I rebuilt in 2016, said he had watched from the window, and noticed I used the same corner post method he had taught me in 1981. He said he had told my mother about it. I said I remembered where I learned it. He said he knew. That was enough. Thomas Crane, 65 years old, and a house at 1847 Whitlock Avenue is still in my parents' names, where it belongs, and the second USB drive is in the third drawer of the desk in Sandra's study, behind the drafting table. I have still not moved and do not intend to. 9 years of recordings. 1 conference room. A father who remembered the fence. When the room heard your own voice used against you, do you think Vivian understood in that moment that it was the recordings that mattered, or the 12 years of receipts underneath them? If this story reached something in you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.